Welcome back to the Eight Man Breakdowns podcast. This is where we discuss all phases of the game of football, including philosophy, play concepts, questions, and more. First off, before I get started with today's podcast, I wanted to say the reason I've switched over to predominantly producing podcast videos for the time being is because the regular season has now begun here in Kansas, and the podcast videos are a lot easier for me to make and keep up with. So as the season progresses, and then eventually when it comes to an end, I will pick back up with my other videos, probably right around Christmas time. So I want to let everybody know that that's the reason why I've switched to predominantly podcast videos for the time being. All right. So now let's get into today's episode. The topic today is installing your system. So you hear coaches always talking about installs all the time. I mean, literally all the time. And so for those of you who might not know, let's just go over what an install is first. All right. So the basic install definition is to place something in position for use. Okay. I literally just Googled install and what does it mean? To place something in position for use. So basically, installing or installations in football is putting in any method of getting your football system, your terminology, your concepts, or your philosophy out to your players before they actually go take the field. All right. So I'm going to go over basically the three most common ways to install your system. That's what I'm going to get into today. Okay. So the first way to install your offense or your system is using printed copies. You know, the old school method of printing off your playbook and giving it out to your players. There's positives and negatives to each one of these methods. All right. So the first one here, printed copies install. Some of the benefits is all the information is going to be right there. All right. So if you literally have your entire playbook printed off and copied of it on paper, you print it off and you give it out to each player. That's another benefit right there. Each player is going to get their own printed copy or system of the entire playbook. Okay. So all the information is right there. All right. Some of the negatives, though, is you're putting lots of responsibility on the players. Okay, you're saying, hey, you guys are in charge of reading this, studying this on your own. All right. Another thing is kids, paper and anything, they lose stuff. Okay, so they might lose it. You know, it's not a digital file on their phone. They're never going to lose their phone, right? And another thing would be you might be wasting paper. I don't know. I've actually been in school districts as a teacher and coach where we had limited amount of copies we could make and print off. So if it depends on what district you're from, obviously, but maybe they see that as a waste of paper if you're printing off a bunch of different copies or full playbooks and giving it out to each player. And I'll say the third thing, I guess, another negative is I had this system when I was in high school. Our coach printed it off in all printed copies, and that was only from 2008 to 2011. And so, and I still remember I didn't use this. I hardly ever looked at it. You know, I maybe looked and glanced through it the first day I got it, then I threw it into a locker and I never looked at it again, or I lost it. So I would say the printed copies install, in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of it, but it definitely is a method you can use. Like I said, to have all the information right there and to literally get out the information to specifically each individual player to have their own copy of it. So yeah, that is one method. All right. So the second one I kind of mentioned there a minute ago was the digital file method. Okay. So if you have a actual digital file or a PDF file of your playbook and that's what you were using to print it off, my suggestion would be you keep it as the digital file and then just send out copies of that digital file to your players. To me, that's the better way to go because like I said, all players have phones and tablets or iPads and Chromebooks or laptops or MacBooks or whatever the case is. They all have some sort of technology that they can open up that file and study that playbook right there. Okay. And so a few more benefits to this would be all the information again is right there. Okay. Another benefit is they're not going to lose it because if they lose their phone, you know, you'd think they were dying, you know. Another one would be you're not using or wasting any paper if that is, like I said, something that your district worries about or cares about. The only negatives, again, is it's still lots of responsibility on your players. You know, you're making them be a part of their own study habits, or you know, you're sending out to them and kind of putting the responsibility on them to read and study it on their own time. But back to that, they have access to it at any time. Okay, so they're most likely, like I said, not going to lose it. They can pull out their phone and study this and look over it at any time. All right. So that's what I would say. The number two is kind of that digital file install, sending things out or sharing your playbook out that way. And then the final one I guess I'll get into is it's becoming much more common now. And actually, this is the method I use is the recorded video install. Okay. So if you take your PDF or your digital playbook file and then you just record yourself talking about it and giving a detailed breakdown of yourself teaching it to your players and then sending it out. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here is talking, and recording a video and talking about things. So you kind of do that exact style, but now you just break down in deep detail your entire playbook. Okay, and you go through it individually on your own. That way that kids that really learn from that audio style of listening and learning that way you're reaching multiple kids. It's not just a visual, it's not just audio, but it's both. You're combining them both. The other thing is you might have them tactile or hands-on learners. You could even add an option to it. Tell them, hey, take notes, write it down. That'll be your tactile version. You'll hands-on, you'll write down notes while you listen and watch this digital recorded video install. Okay. So the benefits again, all the information is right there. Okay. They're not going to lose it. There's no paper used. They can access it at any time. And then again, there's less learning responsibility. This is probably the least learning responsibility being put on the players because you're teaching it to them while you're talking about it. Okay. And if they actually just play it, they could even play it as a podcast in their ears, while they're walking around and listening or whatever they're doing or going on a jog or on the weekend. They have homework, but they can listen to this while they're doing it or whatever the case is. Less learning responsibility is being put on them because you're offering it to be taught in multiple ways, not just like I said for visual learners, but also audio and as well as tactile learners who would like to take notes. They can write it down by hand while they're listening. Okay. The only other thing is they do still have to find time to watch it, but that goes with each one of these installs. The kids do have to find the time to actually approach it and want to learn it. And that's with everything. All right. But like I said, they're receiving the information in more ways, and it's going to help overall each kid get a more equal opportunity to learn your system. Okay. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the final step is for every install is obviously to get out on the field and to put it all into practice and take it to the game field. Right. But you got to do some sort of an install before you get there, unless you want to spend all your practice time reteaching everything. You're going to have to push it out. So, and I know, and maybe not all coaches do installs. So I would definitely recommend doing that. So send out your information, get it out there to kids prior to the season beginning, because then you're going to be way ahead of time when week one rolls around. And then you don't have to necessarily install or go over different concepts each week. If you have them all put in, or at least introduced them all to the kids, they'll have a faint idea of it. You might have to obviously do some reviewing, but it's not all new to them when they first take the practice field on practice day one. All right. And that's going to do it for this episode of the 8-Man Breakdowns podcast. Remember, videos come out every Tuesday night, so be sure to tune in. If you have a question for me, the best way to reach me is by commenting in the comment section below. If you've learned anything or enjoyed any of these videos, please click subscribe and check out some of my other videos right here on the screen. And like always, thanks for tuning in, guys.